I wonder why the results are not accurate about the trans community. Could it be something to do with the fact that the trans community were not even participants in this research? Oh my god. Hey Spuds, it's Jamie. Welcome back to another video. Your first video on the channel. I don't know, but welcome either way. And today we're doing something that we've not done in a while. Oh yes, we are looking at and we are dissecting and we are rebutting a transphobic video. Dun, dun, dun. For those of you who don't know, I am a transgender man. I have a PhD in psychology where I looked at the well-being and development of trans people. Today we're going to be looking through a video that is very wrong and very misguided and sharing a lot of misinformation about the trans community. I am not going to share the channel name or the name of the person making the video. I don't want them to get any attention. I don't want anything to do with them or any comments on their video or anything like that happening. I just want to address what they said in their video and say why it's wrong. They seem to have been heavily influenced by Abigail Schreier's book. I feel like a lot of you will know what that means for the upcoming video and some of you might not. So let's just get straight on with it, shall we?
Today I want to talk about why young women in particular are so susceptible to falling victim to this woke indoctrination that is clearly going on in our society.
This woke indoctrination.
Especially when it comes to transgenderism.
Never trust somebody who uses transgenderism in a serious, unironic way.
Overdiagnosing gender dysphoria, it's quite obvious that this is happening predominantly to younger teenage girls. And of course I want to talk about Abigail Schreier because she wrote the fantastic book called Irreversible Damage. It's about the trans movement.
And definitely do not trust anybody that calls that a fantastic book. Look at that book cover.
And I think that her findings and her discoveries are really important.
Her book is just full of misinformation and unsubstantiated claims, and it's actually her book that has caused a lot of damage.
Mainstream media tries to hide it a lot from these girls, the very girls that are going into a therapist's office.
It's very well known that mainstream media as a whole does not do very much trans positive coverage. They often make up things that look very bad for the trans community that are just not true. I guess she's talking about this kind of media, you know? Anti-trans rhetoric is rife in the British media. Little is being done to extinguish the flames. Having very well-known transphobic people platformed on television. Yes, wow, such trans-friendly positive media. Hundreds of young trans people seeking help to return to original sex. And then the same transphobe just being allowed on TV again. The media is not the trans community's friend.
You know, can talk to them once and get approved for surgeries and hormones, even if they don't actually have gender dysphoria.
That literally doesn't happen though. It takes multiple appointments, typically across multiple years, with wait lists for an initial appointment being up to 5 years long in the UK at the moment. And that's to even be approved for hormones, let alone having any surgery. So to make it sound like somebody can just walk into a random therapist's office once and walk out with a prescription is so misleading.
So young women, you know, feel a really strong need usually to conform and also fit in with a group, a community. Of course, men feel this as well, but this is much more important to most women. So this plays a huge role in what's going on with this transgenderism. If your group is saying that they are they, them, or non-binary, whatever, you start thinking, well, I can't be the only one that's not they, them.
She's basically in very simple terms just describing the concept of rapid onset gender dysphoria. In short, one researcher went out and looked into this phenomenon of gender dysphoria being a social contagion and coined the term rapid onset gender dysphoria. She concluded that gender dysphoria was being the social contagion among teenagers by interviewing parents who frequented transphobic websites. She recruited her participants, who were only the parents of trans kids, through transphobic websites. Rapid onset gender dysphoria has been thoroughly rejected as a term. It's not recognized in any regard when it comes to treating trans people, and it's just very inaccurate with very flawed methodologies in the research, and it's caused a lot of damage when it shouldn't have because it's not even a real thing. Like somebody just put out a really, really terrible piece of research and a load of transphobes just ran with it and think they now have fuel. I wonder why the results are not accurate about the trans community. Could it be something to do with the fact that the trans community were not even participants in this research? Oh my god.
Some women have a more stereotypically masculine personality or temperament, and vice versa, right? And that's fine. But we can look at the big picture and make a conclusion that a lot of women tend to behave this way. And with the sexism thing, a lot of us have this strong need to disprove any stereotype, even if it's true. And I was guilty of this when I was on the left. We are programmed to shut down any conversation where women are said to be more feminine. It's like we view femininity as this weak, bad, negative thing. And that to be successful and to be happy in society, we have to be more like men. I think that's really sexist. I don't understand why modern day feminists don't see that. What happened to all the beautiful things associated with being a woman? Now there's some shame associated with it. It's really, really sad.
What I'm failing to see is how this is an issue with the trans community. This is something that I've seen conflated before by certain types of transphobes, where they're taking one thing that is a equality issue and a sexism issue and a misogyny issue and blaming the trans community for it and conflating the two issues. And she does also seem to be overlapping gender identity with gender expression quite a lot, kind of interchangeably using women and feminine.
These constant voices telling you can do anything a man can do in the same exact way that a man can do it. You can do it, you can do it. In careers, in relationships, all this stuff.
I'm not sure that's entirely what the message is. It's more one of equality and women are not lesser than men, women are not less capable than men, rather than saying women, be men, be like men. It's just saying we should not have this divide based on gender in terms of pay equality and just general treatment within society.
If you don't really want to make a certain career move, or you're not into this hustle culture, you feel like you have to do it to prove yourself. We're ignoring that a lot of women are unhappy doing these things. And again, not just with your career, but in relationships, hookup culture. If men can do it, well, obviously women can do it too. And instead of recognizing that hookup culture and is preventing a lot of people from entering meaningful relationships.
I mean, I very much live by the kind of how about we just accept that people do what they want and what makes them happy as long as they're not hurting other people, and not just assume that they're being influenced or feel like they have something to prove.
Instead of going, oh yeah, this isn't the best thing for most men and women, instead they went, oh yeah, well if a man is doing it, I can do it too. And then I'll be liberated and happy. And we're seeing the exact opposite. Okay, women are miserable.
This is the exact argument I've seen from the whole traditional wife, let's go back to being 1950s in the kitchen kind of women, where it's okay, women have tried this whole liberation thing and more freedom and being more like men, which I don't think that's the case. I think it's just not prescribing specific things for specific people based on their gender, but just allowing people to live their lives and not saying women have to do this because they're women and men are allowed to do this because they're men, just abolishing that kind of attitude. But this really just sounds like she's saying that women are only doing this because they're being influenced and they feel like they have to be like men, but actually it's making them miserable. I don't know where these stats are coming from. I'd be very interested in a citation or two.
And we're seeing that both men and women are more miserable now with rates skyrocketing, anxiety. People are dating a lot less. With this rise of online dating apps and messages and stuff, a lot of things get lost in translation. People don't end up having these intimate conversations. And so that leaves people feeling really lonely and in search of a community that they can belong to. So obviously there's this imbalance between masculine and feminine energies. You're constantly telling women that they have to be more like men, and you're telling men that they have to be more like women.
I think we're saying that there doesn't need to be an arbitrary divide based on somebody's gender, right?
But we need men and women to function in society. One is not better than the other. Both are equally as important, but we're different. And now onto the topic of transgenderism.
Here we go. It's taken nearly 6 minutes of her video, but we're getting to the point.
A lot of young women see this as the cure, right? This will fix all your problems.
Yes, the discrimination, lack of rights, lack of legal protection in many countries, poor access to healthcare. I could keep going on and on. Yes, that is a cure and the path to an easy life. Let's not make it out to sound like being trans is some easy fix and an easy way out of something else, or something that is just easy point blank, because it really isn't.
Because if you're constantly told that being a woman is difficult and you have to work even harder than a man, right? You don't get paid the same amount of money for the same job. All these lies that modern day feminism instills into your brain.
Did she just say pay inequality is a lie? I feel like she did. Okay.
Of course, women will think that, oh, if I just change my gender, things will be infinitely better for me. And then we have teenagers and even children now being taught that this is a really easy fix. You can go on puberty blockers, which are completely reversible.
Yes, they are reversible. How in 10 seconds did we go from pay inequality to trans kids on puberty blockers? And having access to things like puberty blockers and hormones and surgeries later in life improves the well-being greatly of trans people, both kids and adults. and reduces gender dysphoria. And you know, only a measly 98.1% of trans youth who start puberty blockers will go on to take hormones when they're old enough. What a terrible statistic. 98.1%, that's barely any of them.
But you can do that. You can then go on estrogen or testosterone and then get surgeries.
I'm cutting out the photos that she's used of other people because I'm just gonna hazard a guess that she didn't have their permission to use their photos in a transphobic video. And hormones and surgery come when you're older. Just want to make that very clear. Children are not starting hormones or having surgery. I think not taking a moment to clarify that is either deliberately misleading or shows that somebody making the video has not done any research and actually doesn't know anything about the transitioning process. So why is she making a video on it? Do you think she knows that 97.5% of kids who identify as transgender still identify as transgender 5 years later? I feel like maybe she doesn't know that fact. That's incredibly high, and none of these children would ever have had access to hormones until they are much older. And we're talking 5 years of consistently identifying as their gender. These are kids who only socially transitioned. For that 2.5% where it wasn't the right thing for them, no harm, nothing permanent, nothing at all has happened. But for the 97.5%, this will have greatly improved their lives. 2.5%, no impact.
Women now saying that they are non-binary simply because they don't fit into the stereotype of, a perfect woman.
That's not how it works, and also please stop misgendering people. If somebody is non-binary, they are not a woman.
So if they're not totally stereotypically feminine, maybe they're tomboy or androgynous, they are told that they are non-binary or trans.
By who? Who is telling them this? This is some big conspiracy theory from the transphobes that as soon as somebody is slightly non-conforming for their assigned sex, they are labelled as trans and forced to transition. Yes, the trans team comes in quickly, whisks them away and puts them on hormones the very next day, and that's it all done. That just doesn't happen.
And then a lot of them go through surgery, which is crazy because you could be gender fluid. One day you think that you're a man and then the next you're a woman. So you go through all these surgeries and you're left with these permanent changes to your body, and then you could change your gender?
Yes. Adults can consent to surgeries that cause permanent changes. Do you know the regret rate for transitioning? It's under 1%, right? Under 1%. Come on. I don't see her making videos about some of the other procedures that have a 20, 30, 40% regret rate that also cause permanent changes. And one study that looked into non-trans related surgeries into regret rate found a pooled rate of 14.4%. That was seen as like a positively low regret rate of these surgeries. Why aren't people talking about that? Oh, yeah, it's because of transphobia.
A lot of children and teens that end up transitioning and then detransitioning actually discover that all along they were just gay and they could have lived
where is this going? Oh no.
No surgery or anything as a gay individual, and that's all. And instead they go to these therapists who have to affirm that they are transgender and, give them the green light to go get all these surgeries, or else they can have their license taken away from them.
I really don't think she's living in the same transphobic world that we are. That just doesn't make any sense. It's not easy to access gender-affirming care. And yes, gender-affirming care is the approved method by medical boards, by the W path. It is the way that has been found to actually help trans people with, let's remind everybody, of the tiny regret rate of people where it's not right. But with this gender-affirming method, there are constant threats of it being taken away. It's constantly getting harder to access. There are long wait lists, but the reason why doctors do and should affirm trans people is because it is the medically approved method of treating trans people. It's also been shown to improve well-being and reduce gender dysphoria. Why do people have such an issue with it? And whilst I absolutely do think that people who detransition deserve support, I do not think that detransitioners should ever be used as fuel for transphobia by saying, hey, this under 1% regret, which means we should just cut it off for everybody. Never would you do that for any other kind of medical treatment. It's just because it involves trans people and there's a lot of transphobia about.
It honestly scares me to think what I could have done with that information as a kid.
Okay. This is such a common thing. For people with this kind of take on the trans community, it's very rare for them not to bring it back round to themselves and be like, if I were a kid now, I can't imagine what they'd do to me.
When I was 10 years old, you're telling me that, I could be told that I was a boy if I liked more stereotypically masculine things, I could have went, oh yeah.
No, and this is where she's got it all very wrong. I mean, she's got all of this very wrong, but this in particular is very wrong, and I don't like it when transphobes try and be like, oh, woe me, poor me, I could have been shoved on hormones if I were a kid nowadays, because that's not what's happening. You wouldn't have been told, and you won't be told you're a boy just because you're a girl who enjoys some stereotypically masculine hobbies, activities, or expression. That's not how it works. What's happening is that kids who are a gender different to the one they were assigned are expressing this to people, and if they're lucky, they're then getting access to trans-related healthcare, which for a majority of kids will start and finish with counselling and socially transitioning and expressing themselves how they want. And then for a very small number, they will have access to puberty blockers. But this is as they get a little older, and it would be an appropriate time to block puberty from starting. So as that 10-year-old who was interested in some more masculine-related things, you would have also had to have identified as a boy or non-binary and told other people that this is how you felt. That's when, if you did have accepting people around you, if you were lucky enough to have that, you might be taken to a gender clinic to receive some care and talk to people. But in terms of actual medical steps, that would take a very long time to reach. It's a really dangerous misconception that keeps getting spread by transphobes, and is even more dangerous when they spin it on themselves and kind of victimize themselves in this situation, that kids are just expressing themselves in a certain way and being whisked off to some trans factory, when that's not what's happening. Oh.
Be a boy, because that's what they're teaching kids now in school. It's like, oh, your gender is what you feel inside. I could have said, I like sports. I don't really like dresses or dolls.
But that's not what you feel inside, is it? That's how you want to express on the outside. That's not what you feel in terms of your gender. She's just completely conflated gender expression and gender identity. Kids being taught that they can dress and have the hobbies that they want is not a bad thing. It used to be so restrictive of, like, even sports in school was like, here girls, go do netball and skipping, and boys do rugby and football. Teaching kids that trans people exist is not going to make people trans. It's not a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing. It means that the people who are trans will be able to figure out earlier and be happier earlier, because that is what access to trans-related healthcare does, and being allowed to transition does. It improves people's well-being. But it also means that the people who aren't trans will be more open-minded. They'll have learnt about it from an early age and be more accepting of those who are. I was told my whole life, my whole teenagerness, that I was a girl. That was drilled into me, like cis-het normative life. This is what you need to do. Did that make me do that? No, it didn't. Seriously, if influence like that actually worked, and that is what made people their sexual orientation and gender identity, then we would have pretty much no trans or LGBT plus people in general, because it was just never spoken about and never taught. But yet, LGBT plus people still existed.
Maybe I'm a boy, and then I could have gotten hormone therapy. That is insane to me.
That is insane to me, because it wouldn't have happened to you. What makes her think that? She would never have gotten close, anywhere near even sniffing hormones, by being a slightly masculine 10-year-old. It's such a strange concept to me that some transphobes get really horrified by this concept, and for some reason they think that they might have been forced to go on hormones as a child. And it's like, if that horrifies you, the thought that as a teenager somebody might have forced you to go through the wrong puberty, does that not elicit some kind of compassion for the trans community? Because that's literally what you are advocating happens to trans kids, that they are forced to go through the wrong puberty, that they are denied access to the healthcare that they need. We affirm cis kids, why can't we affirm trans kids?
As kids, we're playing, pretend and saying we have superpowers, and we could be pretending to be, animals or something, and you're telling children that they could actually be a member of the opposite sex, and that we should listen to them if they say so, no questions asked, and give them access to hormone therapy.
I mean, there's many questions asked, but again, I'm bringing it back to the point of we listen to cis kids, so why don't we listen to trans kids? I mean, a ton more trans kids go through the wrong puberty and then therefore have to have certain surgeries to reverse that than cis kids do going through the wrong puberty by transitioning and detransitioning. I mean, me included. I went through the wrong puberty. I had to have top surgery because I went through that wrong puberty. Only cis kids are trustworthy when it comes to their gender, apparently. By her logic, though, shouldn't we therefore not be trusting any kids about their gender at any point? And so therefore not allowing any child ever to go through any kind of permanent change in terms of their gender until they are old enough to know it. Which means every kid should be on puberty blockers, right? I'm absolutely not saying that should happen. It shouldn't. But just that's where her logic is taking things.
And back to Abigail, she makes a great point. If we're becoming so accepting of trans people, then why is this rate's still going up.
So I've had to cut out a word because YouTube does not like it, and there is a bit of a trigger warning on this part because I'm sure a lot of people can guess what that word was and what she's talking about here. But it's something that's well known to have a 41% rate within the trans community. And she's trying to say that transitioning increases this rate when it doesn't. In fact, access to healthcare and transitioning and increased acceptance actually decreases this rate within the trans community. It's the difficulty of accessing healthcare, it's the stigma from society, it's the discrimination that leads to an increase in this. It's not being able to access appropriate healthcare. But among those who can actually access healthcare, it is reduced. And to try and say anything but that is horrible.
And another thing that we're not allowed to question is why is it that it was a small percentage of males transitioning to females? Now it's this huge percentage of predominantly teenage girls transitioning into men. It's a complete flip, right? And not even like middle-aged women transitioning if we're so accepting and now people can transition.
The general increase in trans people transitioning is absolutely down to increased acceptance. You ask pretty much any trans person, myself included, would you have transitioned earlier if you could have? And the answer would be yes, absolutely. But they just didn't know that they could, or they didn't have the acceptance around them when they were younger to be able to do that. That's not a social contagion at all. That's simply being given the language to understand something that you were going through and be able to express it to other people. If you don't know how to describe something, if you've never heard of something being a possibility, you're probably going to just try and suppress it for your life until you figure it out, or until you stumble across the right language, right? It's like left-handedness has greatly increased over recent decades. That's not because more people are left-handed, it's just because the stigma around being left-handedness has reduced. Therefore, less stigma, more people. More trans acceptance, more trans awareness, more trans people are realizing. Not more trans people, just more trans people are realizing they're trans. Very big difference. And with the ratio comment about it being more trans masculine people now, which she referred to as women seeking out gender affirming care, this has recently been said. The sex assigned at birth ratio of transgender and gender diverse adolescents in the United States does not appear to favor AFAB, assigned female at birth, adolescents, and should not be used to argue against the provision of gender affirming medical care for transgender adolescents. Ta-da! It's not a thing. There you go. But in all honesty, who is the person making this video to question any of this? Who is Abigail Schreier to question this, to be transphobic, to share this misinformation? Who are they? Why do they think that they are the authorities to speak in a community that they are not part of, that they have clearly not taken the time to actually learn about or speak to people who are from that community? And what they say goes against literal scientific findings and the medical boards and the approved methods of treatment and the trans people themselves. Honestly, they just sound so silly because they don't know what they're talking about. But then if other people don't know, they don't know what they're talking about, they then listen to them, and then this is how misinformation and transphobia spreads. They do not know more than the medical boards, the counsellors, the doctors, the scientists, and most importantly, they do not know more than the trans people themselves.
She also talks about how she believes that social media plays a huge role in this, and I completely agree with her. Things like, Instagram and back then Tumblr.
I feel like she's just read Abigail Schreier's book and swallowed everything and just believed everything, no questions asked. Ironic that she's talking about trans influencers influencing people when clearly she has been very influenced herself. Her attitudes and opinions towards the trans community have been heavily influenced by somebody with a very specific point of view who is not trans themselves and does not know the accurate information about the trans community or the medical treatment of trans people. Very ironic. As trans people online, we're just here sharing our stories, breaking down transphobia, humanizing trans people, and helping other trans people out there. If she or any other transphobes see this as insidious or bad or a really awful, horrible influence on people, then that's their problem. That's their mistake. That's their misinformation. That's their factually incorrect opinion.
She also talks about how these girls don't have a way to be oppressed, which I 100% agree with. A lot of these white teenage girls will really, really want a way to be oppressed because everyone else is constantly talking about how, they're oppressed because of their race or their gender or class or whatever. So you can easily say you're non-binary because apparently that doesn't really have a definition. You can just claim to be non-binary and you are. and then boom, you are now oppressed. Congratulations.
Oh, ew. Many ew, 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 ew. Okay, this is what people used to say about bisexual cis women. Bisexuality among teenagers, particularly teenage girls, used to be called a phase, a fad, a want to be oppressed. That's literally what used to be said. Surprise, surprise, they were wrong to say it, and people don't really say that anymore. There's still a little bit of it, but it's not a general opinion like it used to be. It's not said as much. She also does realise that women still don't have equal rights, right? Like, she knows that's a thing. Women face oppression for being women, and I think it's really rude to say that people are identifying as trans for oppression points or to feel oppressed. Like, no. But then also at the beginning saying that it's an easy fix. Which one is it? Because those two things don't go together. Just another example of a contradiction in transphobic arguments. Okay, so that's it. The video is done. Thank goodness. I had many thoughts about this. I shared most of what I wanted to say about it throughout the video, and I included my screenshots and my references if there's anything that you want to go look into further. And just because she didn't, right? How can you sit there and make a video that's like fact this, scientific finding that, data this, research that, and not show any of it? She sat there honestly not knowing anything about the trans community, trans people, or how the transitioning process works, or anything true or factual about trans people, and she sat there and made a 10-minute video about trans people. Why? I think that's all I want to say on it. I'm sorry if I came across a bit frustrated in this video, just because there was so much misinformation, and it's arguments that like I've heard from so many people, and it's just like this line, like one person writes a book and then people read this book and read nothing else and do no other research and think that that book is speaking the truth, and then they make videos like this and they spread it even further, and it's so frustrating to see. Honestly, transphobes are not coming from a place of any kind of factual knowledge, any kind of authority to speak on trans issues, and it's very easy to disprove them, but it's just frustrating that it has to be done. Let me know what you think down below. I hope you enjoyed this very long video. I know it's difficult to talk about transphobic things and watch transphobic things, but I hope it can at least give some people the information and the tools to push back against other things out there that are similar, and just recognize that it's very wrong, and it's very easy to show that it's very wrong. Thank you for watching. I think I'm gonna go have a nap now. Much love. Bye.